Hi, good evening to all of you. Today, as part of our special class on Unacademy Unlock YouTube platform, we'll be looking at this year's, that is 2021 mains public administration paper 2. Over the next 2 hours or so, I'll be discussing this entire paper. So, without wasting our time, let us start our discussion. Before that, let us look at the courses that are offered on Unacademy platform, and let us start look at the courses. You have you can see it on your screen here. This is valid till 25th. I think it was over. You have iconic subscription, your personal coach and mentor, live mentorship, study planner, mains question and answer practice, open house. Then the batches have started from 23rd February. You have so many GS as well as optional batches. As you can see it on the screen, optional batches have started in the month of February, including our course, Public Administration. You can see that on the screen also. We have Geography, Psychology, Public Administration, Agriculture, PSAR, History, Sociology, Mathematics, Law, Geology, and Geography. So you'll get a 50% discount on all these subscriptions up to either 23rd February. It was over. And these are also you have Unacademy Ultra Combat. There you'll be getting you will be getting a lot of prizes from Unacademy. So let us start our discussion of this paper, 2021 mains public administration paper. As you can see it on the screen here. This is live lecture. Sunal, this is live one. You can always ask me questions. This is a live one. YouTube classes are live classes, so you can ask me any questions. I can see your comments. Right? It's a live one. Then let us go to the questions. Section A, paper 2. The first question. The preamble to the Constitution of India provides a foundational framework of ideals and values for the Indian administration. Yes, again, most of these questions, if you happen to see the question paper, almost 80 to 90% of the questions are the ones which we already have done in our test series, which we have conducted just before the main examination on an academy platform only. So that is the reason why most of our students also did not feel any difficulty in answering the questions, because they already have practiced answers to all these questions. The first question, the preamble provides a foundational framework of ideals and values for the Indian administration. In fact, this is also a question we have discussed in our classes. As you can see here, what does the preamble talk about? The preamble talks about there are so many adjectives in front of the word republic, secular, socialistic, then a democratic, sovereign republic. It talks about all those things. So what the preamble does is that it provides framework to the political executive as well as bureaucracy regarding how the country should be administered. For example, democracy. So what you have to talk about here is that these administrators must be they are expected to ensure the democratic functioning of our governance. What do we mean by that? As we say, democratic function means participation of citizens in governance, accountability of administrators, effective grievance redressal mechanisms. This is what the democracy is all about. And this is what our administrators are expected to do. That is what the preamble to our constitution says. It says that our administrators are expected to provide what we call they are expected to provide they are expected to ensure that there will be participation of citizens in governance. There will be proper accountability mechanisms within the governance. There should be the consensus-oriented administration. These are all the things that they are expected to ensure. That is what preamble says. Then socialism. The word socialism becomes very important because, as you can see, this word socialism becomes more important in this age of globalization and liberalization, because uh, what this capitalist societies, economists do is that this capitalism results only in widening inequalities in the distribution of income and wealth. You can see during the past 2 years of corona crisis also, it was found that 84% of people in our country have seen their incomes declining. That is where socialism becomes very important. The government must, the administrators must, through their policies, whether it is fiscal policy or monetary policy, developmental policies, welfare policies, infrastructure policies, or industrialization policies, must ensure that these widening inequalities are reduced, and that is where preamble comes to the rescue of the administrators. Similarly, secularism. It becomes very important, secularism. Why? Because this secularism is the foundation of our country. Unity in diversity is what that really makes our country continue without any kind of difficulties. And this is done. This can be done only when the administrators are highly, completely secular. As we study in civil services values also, impartiality and non-partisanship. These administrators must strictly implement rule of law. They should not differentiate people in the name of their religion, caste, region, ethnicity, race, gender, and so on and so forth. And that is where again preamble comes to the rescue. Sovereignty. The most important one here is the sovereignty. What is needed is sovereignty of the citizens. You must ensure that citizens are sovereign. You must ensure that sovereignty of the citizens is protected. As we study with Thomas Hobbes, the relationship between the citizens and the state is a 2% zero-sum game. But what happens here is that whenever the state acquires more power, it will be only at the cost of ordinary people. And that is the reason why administrators must ensure that they are truly the servants of the people and they treat citizens as sovereign entities. And that is what the question is about. So you have to explain all those adjectives in front of the word republic and see how the administrators are expected to ensure that all of them are implemented in reality. That is what you have to write for this question. Then come to the next question. Examine the extent to which the ideal of the constitutionalism as government by limited powers has been a functional reality in India. Again, this question we have discussed in our classes as well as in our test series also. One of the important features of constitutionalism, as we have mentioned, as we keep on saying, is that limited government. What is the difference between dictatorship and democracy? In dictatorship, all the powers are there in the hands of the dictator. All the powers, dictator has unlimited powers. Whereas democracy is all about separation of powers and division of powers, and more importantly, limited powers. So none of the organs of the state, whether it's a legislature or executive or judiciary, have absolute powers. That is what we study as part of one of the important features of our constitution, as we say constitutionalism. What we say here is that none of these organs of the state are what we call sovereign in their domains. They are only supreme. The one thing that is sovereign is the people and the constitution. Now the question says that whether this ideal of constitutionalism is a functional reality in India or not. This is where you require analysis. What you have to say here is that whenever the country witnessed a charismatic person becoming the leader of the country, and when that political party had absolute majority on the floor house, more often than not, it resulted in what we call dictatorial functioning of the leader, especially the prime minister. That is when the country was easily going into this dictatorial mode of functioning. Give the example of emergency, wherein the then prime minister had politicized both judiciary as well as civil services, had taken away the freedom of the press. And this is what we have seen whenever the country had witnessed this single party rule. That is the reason why for a majority part of our history, post-independent India's history, we have seen that there is constitutionalism, but we have also seen the times when the political party which has majority on the floor of house in Lok Sabha, absolute majority led by a charismatic leader, would always turn itself into what we call a dictatorship. And that is when we find that this idea of constitutionalism was facing a lot of threat from these strong personalities. After writing these things, you have to talk about what should be done. You say that a very independent, impartial and proactive judiciary, along with a dynamic and probing media, supported by a vigilant civil society, can ensure that none of the organs of the state can misuse their powers and become dictatorial in their function. That is what you have to write for this question. Please remember all these questions. All these questions you can see that all these questions are mostly analytical ones. You need good knowledge of the current affairs, and also you need to analyze them also better. Next, let us go to the next question. Red tapeism is a major obstacle to the implementation of good governance. Comment. Again, we kept on talking about these things in our classes, where for a very long period of time, in almost every class, that is what we keep on saying. It's as if we are reading our class notes only. If you look at these questions. So basic problem we say is that good governance. What is the objective of good governance? The objective of good governance is to ensure that we are able to maximize welfare for maximum number of people. We must ensure empowerment of citizens. And who is expected to ensure these objectives of good governance? Automatically, it is the bureaucracy, because political executive is temporary in nature, whereas bureaucracy is permanent. So it is the bureaucracy that is expected to achieve objectives of good governance. The bureaucracy that is it is the bureaucracy that is expected to ensure that these outlays are transformed into outcomes, and it is also the bureaucracy that is expected to ensure that the developmental initiatives of the government are known to the people and also are made available to the people. And this is where the problem is. The basic problem here is that in India we still have only this Weberian bureaucracy, which gives only importance to rules and regulations, which results in what we call goal displacement. On top of it, we have so much of hierarchy, rigid hierarchy, which is a feature of what we call this Weberian bureaucracy, and which we have inherited from the British colonial administration. So combine all of them, what we see is red tapeism. Whenever our Prime Minister goes to America, inviting the American industrialists to come and invest in our country, what the standard reply that he gets from the American industrialist was that he always promises red tapeism. Sorry, he always promises red carpet when we come to India. On the other hand, when we come to India, what we get is only red tapeism. That is where the problem is. Right from the topmost level to the lowest level, we have red tapeism only. Right from topmost level to the lowest level, we have red tapeism only. And that is coming in the way of this good governance. We are not able to transform the outplays into outcomes. We are not able to ensure participation of citizens. We are not able to change the value system of our bureaucracy. And ultimately, we are not able to ensure good governance. So what is the solution then? What should be the solution? What can be the solution? The solution is very simple. The solution is very simple. You must bring in governance reforms. You must bring in the governance reforms. What are the governance reforms that we are talking about here? First and foremost, implement digital governance, digitalization of administration, so that this red tapeism can be easily overcome. Second, as suggested by Second Administrative Reforms Commission, number of hierarchical levels in the central secretariat organizations should be reduced from the present 16 to 4. Automatically, red tapeism will come down. Third, change the performance evaluation of this bureaucracy. At this point of time, their performance evaluation is done in terms of their ability to implement rules and regulations. Now, evaluate their performance in terms of ability to realize outcomes. Fourth, ensure complete transparency in governance, so that ordinary people also will come to know about how their bureaucracy functions. And fix accountability on the part of bureaucracy, time limit and accountability. With all these measures, we can easily overcome red tapeism in governance, but it requires a lot of political will. Unfortunately, political will is absent in our country. Next, moving on to the next question. The role and the status of the speaker in parliamentary system have their foundation in the speaker's stance on neutrality. Comment. Why this question was asked? If you look at this question was asked because of the fact that the country has witnessed complete politicization of the office of speaker, both at the central level as well as at the state levels. both at the central level as well as at the state levels. And at the state level, this politicization was too complete. It was too blatant politicization, and this had become much more problematic because of this what we call anti-defection law. On top of it, the speaker has absolute powers in running the activities of the house. Speaker has absolute powers in running the affairs of the house. So what happens here is that this speaker, whether it is at the central level or at the state level, the speaker is acting more as the representative of ruling political party on the floor of the house than unbiased custodian of the house, and this is where it had become problematic. Why? Because whenever the government was in any kind of trouble, the speaker would use his extraordinary powers to bail the government out of the trouble. And most of the time, he would not allow the opposition parties to move any motions that can make uncomfortable the rule of the stand of the government uncomfortable. There were many instances, you can quote them, when the speakers had come to the rescue of the government. In Uttarakhand, the speaker did not allow the division when it comes to passing a budget when the opposition parties demanded. At that point of time, ruling political party did not have majority. In 2014, in Lok Sabha, please remember, for all these questions, you have to give examples. In 2014, in Lok Sabha, when the AP State Reorganization Bill was discussed, again the speaker had used her powers. What did she do? The government of the day did not have majority on the floor of the house. The opposition, in fact, ruling party members have tabled no confidence motion on the floor of the house. The speaker came to the rescue of the government by not allowing this no confidence motion to be discussed on the floor of the house. And on the other hand, the speaker had got all these MPs thrown out of the house, and the AP State Reorganization Bill was passed, as recently pointed out by our Prime Minister, also in complete darkness. That is where the problem comes up. After writing all these things, as usual, what you have to do is you have to provide the solutions. Like in the Westminster model of bureaucracy in the United Kingdom, once a speaker, always a speaker. This is what initially we also wanted. The first speaker of Lok Sabha, Maulanka, what did he do? He resigned from Congress party to ensure impartial functioning of the speaker. But from 1970s onwards, the office of speaker had become very controversial and very problematic, because the ruling political party has realized the importance of this office of speaker in protecting the government and promoting the interests of the government on the floor of the house. So what is required is that once a person is elected as speaker, he must resign from the political party to which he belongs to, and then he must also ensure impartial functioning of the house. More importantly, we must make changes to anti-defection law also. Let the power to decide defections be taken away from the speaker, and let them be completely what we call automatic in nature. The moment any person defects, whether independent or a political party member defects, automatically he will lose the membership, and then he can contest elections in the next 6 months on a different party ticket. These kind of simple changes that can make the office of speaker more impartial also. But at the end of the day, we need to move towards a political culture based on what we call cognitions. We have transplanted all those systems of the West, but unfortunately, the functioning of those systems is not democratic in nature. That is the reason why the functioning of all these structures and systems is still guided by what we call the behaviors of a feudal society, as Rick's points out. Next question. The union government develops and practices strategies to administer increasing number of existing local self-government services by sidelining local initiatives and discretion. These are all, again, what I say are current affairs issues. What is happening is that this is the basic criticism against smart cities project, right? What happened with the smart cities project is that the central government is making it more of a bureaucratic program, or for that matter, all the schemes, centrally sponsored schemes, they are more bureaucratic in nature. One of the criticisms against this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan also, that you are completely excluding these local self-governments. The basic issue here is that the central government adopts what is called still a centralized top-down approach to development. The central government at the top decides the programs, they decide the implementation processes, They decide the performance evaluation measures. They also decide how and where and when to implement the programs. In the process, they're completely sidelining these local self-governments and local initiatives also. That is the reason why most of them end up as a failure. Most of them end up as a failure. As examples, as I said, the one of the criticism against smart cities project is that one size fits all approach the central government is obsessed with, and they fix the parameters, the standardized parameters at the national level without looking at the conditions at the local level. So what happens is that this one size fits all approach is always going to be a failure, and they give a lot more importance to the bureaucracy, which is not accountable to the people. In the bureaucracy, they know how to manipulate these outcomes. At the end of the day, the local people as well as the local self-governments are completely left out of this development process. Because of which, the same problems that we have encountered before the enactment of 73rd, 74th amendments can be seen even now also, in spite of almost 30 years of 73rd, 74th amendments. And as I said, I gave the example of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. I gave the example of this smart cities project. These are all the flagship schemes of the government. Or for that matter, most of the schemes related to agriculture or other flagship schemes of the government like PMJAY or Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. All of them are implemented, at the top level without involving the people at the local level. That is where most of them end up as a failure. After writing these things, what should be the solution? We can have, ideally, the number of centrally sponsored schemes should be very less. But we are not living in an idealistic world. As suggested by various commissions and committees, the number of centrally sponsored schemes should be less than 10. But we are not living in an idealistic world. So what is the solution? Let there be schemes. Let there be the more number of schemes also, because in India we have federal polity and the elections are held separately to parliament as well as state assemblies. That is the reason why national political parties have to come out with so many of these schemes so that they can go to the people and win elections. Let them have those schemes, but give freedom to the people at the local level to decide their implementation processes, who should be involved, how they should be involved, and let also them decide other parameters by taking into consideration local conditions. And most importantly, let all these schemes be implemented with what we call local self-governments, and more importantly, new localism, multi-actor paradigm at the local level. That is what you have to write for this question. Right? If you have any doubts, you can ask. Otherwise, I will move on to the other questions. Any doubts, you can ask. Right? If you have any kind of doubts, you can ask. So, then let us move on to the second question. Kautilya envisages protection, welfare and prosperity of the state and its people as the utmost concern of the ruler. In this context, the significance of Kautilya's emphasis on governance, accountability and justice in contemporary India. So the question basically says the significance of Kautilya's Arthashastra and the significance of Kautilya's concept of good governance for contemporary India. Again, if you happen to read our notes, these are the things which are straight away. We can see these things in our notes, right? As part of good governance, Kautilya has said that the king should always look to maximize the welfare of people. And you can start your answer with Kautilya's famous dictum, wherein he said that in the happiness of his subjects lies his happiness, in their welfare his welfare. The king shall consider as good anything that benefits his subjects and shall not consider as good anything that benefits himself. That is the talisman of Kautilya when it comes to defining the functions, duties and responsibility of the king. As we discussed in our classes also, this is where the present day contemporary India has far away moved away from Kautilya's concept of good governance. First and foremost, Kautilya has said that the king should always be accessible to citizens, accessibility. But unfortunately, if you look at the present day rulers, forget about the prime minister. Even the panchayat member also is difficult to meet. We never can get an opportunity to meet our MLAs or MPs or the ministers or the prime ministers or the chief ministers. They sit in ivory towers and they make assumptions about the problems of the people and come out with the policies. Right? This can be seen, you can see them during this corona crisis. The government was simply absent when lakhs of migrants, crores of people were walking on the streets for hundreds and thousands of kilometers. The central and state governments are completely absent. Why? Because when you don't reach people, when you don't go to people, how do you know what the problems of people are? This is where the problem is. That is why Kautilya talks about accessibility. Next thing is that Kautilya says that responsiveness. One of the important features of the concept of good governance is responsiveness. He said that king should always respond to the problems of people. King should always make himself accessible to the people. Again, as I said, during the second wave of corona in Delta variant, even our prime minister had to accept at one point of time that the government has failed. That is where we don't find honesty in our political leadership, whether it is a central level or at the state level. More than 5 million people died, 50 lakh people died. What the central and state governments have done is they were trying to hide the real statistics. When dead bodies were floating in the Ganges, UP government has said that there is a practice of the religious practice of the people of Uttar Pradesh, that they will throw their dead bodies into the river. That is where the problem is. There is no accountability in the system at all. There is no accountability at all in the system. Right? The basic problem here is that we have this representative democracy. In this representative democracy, the problem is that the accountability of the rulers is limited only to voting in elections. So once we vote in elections, for the next 5 years there is no accountability. What we have once we vote in elections for the next 5 years is what is called electoral dictatorship. For the next 5 years, you have only electoral dictatorship. What we have is. So that is the reason why Kautilya becomes very, very important. Why? Because there is neither accessibility, nor accountability, nor responsiveness, nor what we call good governance in the whole process. Right? That is where it becomes very important. Look at the legislature; they are only interested in their powers and privileges. Executive interested more in protection of their own interests. And look at judiciary. Unfortunately, judicial reforms in India have been a complete failure. Number of cases pending with our judiciary. It would take our judiciary at least next under 300 years to complete the investigations into all those cases, provided in the next 300 years no fresh cases are filed. Right? No fresh cases are filed. And this is where we say that this is where we say that Kautilya's Arthashastra becomes very important. His concept of good governance becomes very, very important. Then after writing all these things, you have to talk about the solutions. What should be done? Simple, good governance. You must implement political reforms, economic reforms. You must implement governance reforms. You must implement budgetary reforms. You must implement these other reforms like citizen charter, social audits, and e-governance and grievance redressal mechanisms to make sure that we can ultimately realize the Kautilya's concept of good governance. There must be accountability at all levels, right from the Prime Minister to the peon in the government offices. So that is what you have to write for this question. That's what you have to write for this question. Moving on, let us move on to the other questions. District Collector is the most important functionary in district administration in India. In light of the above statement, discuss the multidimensional responsibility of District Collector in effecting coordinated development administration in India. Again, these are the things which we have discussed so many times in our classes also. So, for example, what are the multidimensional responsibilities of the District Collector? What are the multidimensional responsibilities of the District Collector? First, as a District Collector, he is responsible for maintenance of land records. During the British times, he was called the collector because he was responsible for collecting land revenue. After independence, we have abolished this land revenue, agricultural income tax. So the term collector had also become misnomer. That is the reason why we say that now when we say district collector, the functions of district collector, it means that updating the land records and also digitalizing the land records so that farmers can be given loans on the basis of those land records. As magistrate, he is responsible for maintenance of law and order. The district administration, the police administration will work under district collector. The Supreme Court police will work under the district collector. He has ministerial powers also. He has the powers of the civil court also. And in case of some other aspects, he also has other powers like imposition of section 144 or imposition of curfew and shoot at sight orders. All these things can be done only by the district collectors. And then we also have these other functions of district collector. He is the chief development officer of the district. As the chief development officer of the district, he has to ensure coordination between various departments working in the district level. All the departments, health department, education department, forestry department, irrigation department, roads and buildings department, all these departments in the district, all these line agents in the district will be working under district collector, and he must ensure proper coordination among all of them. District collector is also responsible for conducting elections in the district. From panchayat to the parliament, he is the one who is responsible for conducting all the elections. And district collector, we say, is also responsible for disaster management. He is also the head of district disaster management authority. He is also responsible for disaster management. He has to be proactive. He has to anticipate the disasters and also take measures before they are struck. And finally, district collector is also the chief protocol officer of the district. What we say is that the office of district collector in India is the example of what we call in a prismatic society wherein a single structure performs multiple functions, which mostly results in overlapping. Then you talk about towards the end recommendations of second ERC. Second ERC has said that let the district collectors perform only specific functions. It has said that let the designation of district collector be changed to district development officer or chief executive officer of the district, so that he can be made accountable to those specific functions only. That's what you have to write here. The role of the governor is of a sagacious counselor, mediator, and arbitrator rather than of an active politician. In this context, examine the role of governor in state politics in India. Again, these questions are repeatedly asked every year. And this year also it had become controversial because of what is happening in most of the states, whether it is West Bengal or whether it is Karnataka, whether it is Tamil Nadu, whether it is Andhra Pradesh or other, whether it is Maharashtra. What is happening is that active politicians are appointed as governors, and they interfere in the functioning of the state administration. You must have seen yesterday itself what happened was a major incident took place. West Bengal government had sent a notification to the governor requesting him to convene the state assembly, and there was some kind of printing mistake. The assembly was supposed to be convened start from 2 p.m. in the afternoon. There was some typo error and it was set to a.m. The governor has come out with the same notification saying that the assembly would meet at 2 a.m. This is where, this is just like, the kind of, ego clashes between the governors and chief ministers. As we know, the West Bengal governor and the chief minister are at loggerheads all the time, literally fighting with each other. The same thing happened with recently in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu governor has rejected the NEET bill. He has every right to reject the bills passed by the state assembly. That's not a problem at all. But the comments he has made, they are unwarranted. Why this is happening? Because our constitutional forefathers have not given that much importance to the office of governor when they discussed the office of governor in the Constituent Assembly. Even though the Constituent Assembly had met for almost 3 years, they have discussed about the office of governor only for 1 day. They were under the assumption that the Congress party would be there in power forever. So the office of governor would become only ornamental position. They could never imagine the situation that a different political party can be power at the state level also, then the governor becomes controversial. They had given huge amount of discretionary powers to governors without making him accountable and without also ensuring impartial and unbiased functioning of the governor. And that is where it had become problematic. And how do we end our answer with? We'll end our answer with the recommendations of Sarkari Commission and also that of Punji Commission and of course Supreme Court judgment in SR Bommai case. An active politician should not be appointed as governor. The person who is appointed as governor should not have actively participated in politics in the immediate past. And once their tenure is over, they should not again go back to politics. And one more thing is that they cannot be removed whenever there is a regime change at the central level. But these recommendations are never implemented, and the governor positions will continue to be controversial in India. Next, recruitment. Let us move on to the next question. Recruitment is the cornerstone of the whole public personnel structure, and it revolves around the problem of attracting the best. Discuss the essential elements of a good recruitment system. Incidentally, this is the same question I have given in our test series also this year. Recruitment is the cornerstone of the whole public personnel structure, and it revolves around the problem of attracting the best. Discuss the essential elements of recruitment system. This is what we say. Recruitment, as we study all the time, is the backbone of public personnel administration. Why? Because all other aspects related to personal administration, whether it is training, whether it is promotions, whether it is performance evaluation, whether it is disciplinary measures, whether it is good governance initiatives, whether it is code of conduct and code of ethics, all of them depend only on recruitment. And that is the reason why recruitment is the most important aspect in public personal administration. So what are the good elements of what are the essential elements of a good recruitment system is what that we have to look at. What are the best elements of a good recruitment system? We say two important things. First one is the recruitment should be done only with one objective, that is those who are getting into the organization have the necessary skills, ability, knowledge, attitude and aptitude to realize the objectives of organization. That is what we say. Nothing else should become any concern of the organization. That is the reason why if you look at the private organizations, in private organizations they only look at one thing, that is whether the concerned person who is recruited has the necessary qualification skills or not. Second, whether the person is appointed to right position or not. Two things, as I said, we are talking about here. One is recruiting people with the necessary talent, skills, knowledge. Second one is giving them right positions in the organization. You are recruiting an engineer and making him the head of the accounts department. That is not the right kind of recruitment. And that is where we talk about the problems with the recruitment system in India. What are the major issues with the recruitment system in India? What are the major problems with the recruitment system in India? The most important problem with the recruitment system in India is that in India recruitment has so many objectives. The government of India has to take into consideration so many things. One is equity. The second one is representation of women. Third one is regional interests. All of them are taken into consideration. In the process, what happens is the most important objective of recruitment is lost. That is, the most important objective of recruitment is that those who are recruited, whether they have the necessary ability or skills to work for the organization or not. On top of it, we also have what we call rank classification and generalist civil service. In the age of globalization, what we say is that what is the need of the average specialist. But unfortunately, what we have only this generalist civil service, IAS matching, dominating the civil services in India, IAS. So because of this, what happens is that we are giving importance to everything else. We are giving importance to equity. We are giving importance to regional interests. We are giving importance to gender. We are giving importance to other interests, but not to what we call the needs and the objectives of organization. That is the reason why what is happening is that most of these civil servants who are recruited, what is happening is that they are not able to perform the tasks that have been given to them for the simple reason that they simply do not have the skills, because all other factors come into recruitment process. And this is where you can talk about the recommendations of second ERC in terms of recruitment in India. Secretariat has said that wherever it is possible, India can go for what is called lateral entry, specialist domain expertise. And it also has said that we must change the examination process also, because this examination process also does not test the qualities that are needed for the people to become successful administrators. You can write all those recommendations of second year also. Proceeding further, traditionally structured administrative systems have outlived their utility. Discuss has how administrative reforms can revamp, restructure, and redesign the existing governmental structures to meet the new challenges faced by the Indian administrative setup. Again, these are the things which we discuss all the time, which we have discussed all the time, and which we discuss all the time. So what we are saying is that this Weberian bureaucracy, the traditionally structured Weberian bureaucracy, with its emphasis on rules and regulations, with emphasis on hierarchy, with its emphasis on secrecy, with its emphasis on closed system of coordination, with its emphasis on written communication, has simply lost its relevance. One of the important reasons why we say that economic reforms in India have not been as successful as they should have been is because of the failure of our governance systems, and that is the reason why we say we need administrative reforms. Right? What kind of administrative reforms that are needed, that need to be implemented, is what the question says. What kind of reforms that needs to be implemented? Right? Let us look at what are the reforms. We have to talk about reforms in the secretariat organizations. First and foremost, as we studied, the number of ministries and departments in the government of India should be reduced from the present 54 to less than 27 as recommended by second IAS. Second, the number of hierarchy levels within the ministries and departments should be reduced from the present 16 to 4. Third, we have what is called inverted pyramid. At the district level, there is only one junior IAS officer called the collector, who is responsible for implementing the schemes and policies that are formulated by the entire secretariat organization, both at the central level as well as at the state level. We have this district collector. Now, right, what we must do is that we must again reverse the pyramid. Whereas we have 150 secretaries working in the central secretariat organizations, 600 joint secretaries. What are they doing? All of them are involved only in policy formulation. And where exactly the problem? Policy implementation. Why can't you take all of them and put them at the field level and ask them to implement the policies? You don't require so many people in the policy formulation, especially in the age of globalization, when there are so many specialists who are coming. You don't require so many journalist officers only working there in the secretariat organizations. That is the reason why second year has said that let us completely dissolve this rank of joint secretary in the secretariat organizations. He is neither part of top level nor part of lower levels in the secretariat organizations. Then we need lateral entry. We need either the single window clearance and clearance of files. We need performance evaluation in terms of outlays and in terms of outcomes of bureaucracy. We need to depoliticize our civil services, and we need citizen charters. We need right to information. We need digital governance. We need better and effective grievance redressal mechanisms. That is what we say here. Then only we can expect any kind of improvement in our administrative systems. It is only the inefficiency, red tapeism, corruption, lack of accountability on the part of our administrators that is coming in the way of our 9% growth rate. That is what we have to write. Next, go to the next question. The government policy of large-scale privatization of the key sectors of economy may affect India's economic health. Comment. Recently, the government has said that they will be opting for what is called aggressive privatization. They are, they said that they will be privatizing most of the public sector enterprises. And this aggressive privatization policies of the government have raised serious doubts. They have raised serious doubts among the people about the consequences of this privatization. Why? Because it is believed that the government is looking at privatization only from one perspective, that is a revenue perspective. In the process, the government has ignored the sociological and other consequences of this privatization. That is what the critics have said. For example, the government has spoken about this. The government has spoken about this asset monetization policy in a national monetization policy. Now, what is the problem here? The government has said that they will privatize the railway station, they will privatize the stadiums, and they will privatize the other public utilities. Now, what happens here is that if all of them are privatized, the private sector is not concerned about what we call the private sector is not at all concerned about the sociological consequences of their policies. They look at everything from the perspective of what we call only profits. So if tomorrow the private railway stations are privatized, then the railway stations might also become like airports. Entry into the railway station, you have to pay a huge amount of money, 500 rupees. And then if you have to buy a bottle of water in railway station, it will be 300 rupees. A cup of coffee can be 500 rupees. Like that is what we see in the private sector also. That right, like what we see in the airports. And that is the reason why it is said that the government must also take into consideration these other consequences of what we call consequences of this privatization processes. Similarly, the government also must look at the strategic interests. The government, for example, take the case of these public sector enterprises which are there in what we call core industries: iron and steel, petroleum, gas, power. This is their assets. The government cannot look at them only through the prism of the profit. If they are privatized tomorrow, if there is any problem, then what happens? It can result in the private sector monopolizing the services, and it can also result in adversely impacting the interests of the people also. That is the reason why. That is the reason why it is said that the government must look at privatization in a more careful manner. It cannot just go for privatization for the sake of privatization. That is what the question says. And so what we say that ultimately at the end of the day, privatization must be seen only as an instrument. It cannot be seen the objective. Privatization can be seen only as the instrument to ensure competition, to improve quality of service delivery mechanisms, and also to provide better services, quality services to the people. Beyond that, nothing else should be beyond that, nothing else should be seen through privatization. On the other hand, if the government opts for aggressive privatization, it can have adverse consequences. Incidentally, I have given the same question in our test series also. Next, let us move on to the next question. As a constitutionally mandated body, the Finance Commission stands at the center of fiscal federalism. Evaluate the role of Finance Commission in ensuring just and equitable resource sharing among the states and the union. Again, this question was asked because of the controversy that surrounded around the 15th Finance Commission. And all these things are there in our notes. The best part of it that is whatever the question that UPSC has asked in our this year's examination, most of the things are there in the notes. Article 280 of the Constitution talks about the Finance Commission. It says that it is the responsibility of the central government to set up a Finance Commission after every 5 years to decide upon various issues. First, the vertical division of tax revenues between the center and states. Second, horizontal division of tax revenues between the states. Third, the grants in aid to be given to the states. And fourth, any other matter referred to the Finance Commission by the President. In recent times, the role of Finance Commission has expanded. It has also become a little bit more controversial because the terms of reference of Finance Commission are decided by the central government unilaterally without consulting the state governments. And the members of Finance Commission were also appointed by the central government, again unilaterally. So this is where it had become slightly a little bit more controversial. 15th Finance Commission had become more controversial because 15th Finance Commission was asked by the central government to change the population census from 1971 to 2011. Obviously, South Indian states have stabilized their population long time back. Obviously, they were losing out. That is when they said that this is completely unjust. Similarly, 15th Finance Commission was also asked by the central government that it should also look at the flagship schemes of the government and make the financial devolution to the states, what we call mandatory, in terms of the ability of the state governments to implement the flagship schemes of the government. This is where again it had become controversial. Another thing that had become controversial was regarding this defense modernization fund. Central government has said that they want to set up defense modernization fund, and 50% will be contributed by the central government, and remaining 50% has to be contributed by the states. This also was a question by the state governments saying that why should they contribute to defense modernization fund when defense is part of the union list. All these things had become controversial. And of course, the tendency of the central government to bypass and the state governments in sharing the tax revenues by imposing cess and surcharge. In the last 7 years or so, the central government had collected almost 21 lakh crores of rupees through this cess and surcharge on petroleum products, which it did not share with the state governments. So all of them had become controversial. And of course, the horizontal devolution of tax revenues. As I said, the Finance Commission takes into consideration two important things: equity and efficiency. It was said that 14th Finance Commission has given only importance to equity. That is, those states which are poor, which are poor, are given more incentives. On the other hand, performing states have complained that they have been penalized for their performance by successive finance commissions. You reduce your population, the amount of revenues that you are getting from the central government will come down. You reduce your fiscal deficit and revenue deficit. You increase your tax revenues, automatically the amount of money that you are getting. There are perverse incentives for the state governments to keep themselves poor backward so that they can get more finances from the central government. We have 28 states, but only one state, Uttar Pradesh, gets almost 19.5% of the finances, revenues that all the states are supposed to get. 1/5 of the revenues are going to only one state. Similarly, Bihar gets 14%. Two states almost 35%. So what is happening is that equity is given so much of importance by the Finance Commission that it has also ignored efficiency. But 15th Finance Commission has tried to address all these concerns. They have said that the 15th Finance Commission has included the ability of the state governments, it is called demographic performance. The ability of the state governments to stabilize their population, reduce their population, it was given importance. And then the tax effort also was given importance by the 15th Finance Commission. So that the concerns expressed by the state governments are addressed by the Finance Commission. All these things you have to write for this question. Then proceeding further, let us move on to the next question. Recent market approaches to public services present serious challenges to traditional and traditional state-sponsored public service values. Evaluate this treatment in the context of Indian administration. Very good question. Market approaches to public services. What is my market approaches to public services? What we call NPM. In this NPM, we say that the state considers itself the state will consider itself as a service provider and treating people as customers. And the state will be competing with the private sector in terms of providing services to the citizens. And definitely it has posed a huge amount of challenge to state-sponsored public services values. Traditional and sponsored. Why? Because what happened is that in the first place, why it had come into existence? It had come into existence because of the failure of the traditional mode of administration, wherein you have state monopoly, state centricism, and centralized top-down approach to development. This led to massive levels of corruption. This led to diversion of resources. This led to nepotism and favoritism, and this led to failure to transform our outlays into outcomes. And that is the reason why we had no option but to involve the private sector, the non-governmental organizations, in terms of providing services. For example, these Service Seksha Abhiyan as well as NREGA and other flagship schemes of the government now are implemented mostly with these NGOs and civil society organizations. And it has definitely posed a huge amount of challenge to what we call state-sponsored public service values. What kind of changes that we are expecting from the from the civil servants here? Till now, civil servants had a monopoly over service delivery mechanisms. Now they are expected to work with and compete with, sometimes complement the private sector as well as the non-governmental organizations. They must treat private sector and non-governmental organizations as equal partners in the development process. For this, they need to be radical change the attitude and aptitude of our civil servants. Next thing is that with NPM approach, they have to consider people as customers, and they have to transform their moral responsibility to legal accountability. For this, again, they need to be efficient also. These are all the development challenges that our civil servants pose, our civil servants face in this changed environment. And what is needed is ultimately the governance reforms. We need citizen charters, we need e-governance, we need effective grievance redressal mechanisms, we need more transparency, we need digital governance, so that they can become successful also. So that is what you have to write for this question. Next, the increasing criminalization of politics is a major threat to the basic fabric of Indian democracy. Comment. This is what we say all the time. India has a democracy, but the problem is that our democracy is not what we call vibrant, dynamic, effective democracy. We have democracy only on paper. As we study, what we have is only constitutional formalism. There is huge amount of difference between what is there in the constitution and what is there in reality. Our constitutional forefathers could never envisage a situation wherein 43% of members of parliament in the Lok Sabha have criminal records against them. They could never imagine, they could never envisage these kind of events. So what is happening is that lawbreakers are becoming lawmakers. This criminalization of politics started from late 1960s, when the monopoly of the Congress party had come to an end at the central level, as well as in the states. So the public offices had become much more competitive in nature, and political parties are more than happy to take the help of criminals in winning elections. Not only that, they also are more than happy to invite these criminals to take part in politics also, politicization of crime. And these criminals had come into politics, they had become members of parliament, they had become members of state legislative assemblies, and they also become members of council of ministers also. That is where the lawmakers have become lawmakers. The rule of law had become the major casualty. On top of it, judiciary is also not willing to be proactive and end this criminalization of politics. Solutions, what should be done? Very simple. Once we know the problem, electoral reforms, judicial reforms, legal reforms, police reforms. Let our Supreme Court set up a fast track courts to look into the cases against all those who are in politics, who are in positions of against whom FIRs are filed. Let them investigate these cases and complete the investigations within a stipulated period of time, maybe 6 months or 1 year. Any person who is convicted, not for 2 years or 1 year, any person who is convicted should be banned from contesting politics for the rest of life. India does not require criminals in our politics. Why should it? It should only be 2 years, and why it should only be 6 years? Let them be banned. Let them not participate in any political activity for the rest of their life. We have 1.4 billion population. If we can get rid of the criminals, we can get good people. As Anthony Down says in Inside Democracy, people must be given rational choices. People must be given choices so that they can take rational decisions. And those political parties which encourage the criminals should be banned. They should be de-recognized. Of course, none of these reforms are implemented, but if you write all of them, you will be getting into services. That is what you have to write for this question. Moving on to the section B. Moving on to section B. You can see here on the screen section B. Fifth question, A part. No rural development strategy can succeed unless it is complemented by appropriate Panchayat Raj institutions. Examine the statement. Please remember, we have seen the similar question in our section A also. If I go back to the question, you can see here. This is the question. The union government develops and practices strategies to administer the increasing number of existing local government services by sidelining local initiatives and discretion. The same question was repeated here in section B also, fifth question A. No rural development strategy can succeed unless it is complemented by appropriate Panchayat Raj institutions. Examine the statement. I don't think I need to again explain this question. Whatever the explanation we had given for the previous question, exactly the same thing you can write here. I gave you the example of this NREG or Sarsiksha Abhiyan, PMJAY or Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. All these schemes, similarly take case of schemes related to agriculture, all those schemes can be successful only when there is active participation by Panchayat Raj institutions. And more importantly, participation of Panchayat Raj institutions is necessary but not sufficient. We should move towards what is called new localism, wherein you are involving the Panchayat Raj institutions. Apart from them, you are also involving civil society organizations, NGOs, community-based organizations, their self-help groups, and all other institutions. Multi-actor paradigm. That is what you have to write for the question. That's what you have to write for the question. Then let us go to the next question. Niti Aayog has been constituted to implement the goal of cooperative federalism discussed. Almost every year the same question is asked. Niti Aayog and cooperative federalism. So what we have, we keep on saying is that the previous institution that was there, what we call it as a planning commission. Planning commission had become extremely controversial. During the phase of confrontational federalism between 1967 and 1990, Planning Commission was an institution that was attacked by the state governments all the time. It was said that this Planning Commission was highly discriminatory in terms of its allocation of resources to the states. Those states which were ruled by the opposition parties always have complained that they have been discriminated by the Planning Commission. And that is the reason why when the BJP government came to power in 2014, they had taken the decision to disband this Planning Commission and replace that with a new institution called Niti Aayog. And they said that this Niti Aayog is the best example of what we call cooperative federalism. Why Niti Aayog can be called the best example of cooperative federalism? First and foremost, Niti Aayog does not have any financial powers. So there is no question of any perceived prejudices and biases. Second, the government also has ended the 5-year plans. So Niti Aayog also does not have any powers to formulate the plans. Third, the Niti Aayog also does not have any powers to implement the plans. When there are no plans, there is a question of implementing the plans. Then fourth, Niti Aayog also, the state governments also need not come to Delhi and meet Niti Aayog members to get their plans ratified, unlike in the previous planning commission. That is also not required. Next, there are no, and at present also, the Niti Aayog does not prescribe any kind of procedures and processes for implementation of programs. State governments have given complete independence there. On top of it, Niti Aayog can help the state governments in a more constructive and productive manner. The state governments are requesting repeatedly Niti Aayog to conduct research in their states, to conduct extensive research and also evaluate the policies in an independent manner. Niti Aayog has an in-house group pool of experts who can go to the field level, conduct research, and also provide the much needed information to the state governments regarding the effectiveness of their implementation processes. They come out with their solutions also. In that sense, now the state governments are now looking at this Niti Aayog more as an institution to promote cooperative federalism. Of course, it does not mean that there is no criticism of Niti Aayog. Since this Niti Aayog does not have any real powers, nobody is taking them seriously also. Mamata Banerjee, the Chief Minister of Bengal, has said that she will not attend the meetings of Niti Aayog because it is nothing but a coffee club where people come and discuss and nothing else, no decisions are taken. But that's not required for us. Next, responsibility and accountability are two major goals of good governance. Discuss the statement in the context of Indian administration. That is what we say. What we say is that India has inherited colonial administrative systems. When the Britishers had framed those structures, when the Britishers had come out with those procedures, rules and regulations, their basic objective, their major objective was to make sure that there would not be any accountability of the British administration, right from the topmost level, the Governor General, to the lowest level, to the people, because it was highly exploitative in nature. It was highly exploitative in nature. So they made sure that the administrators were only made accountable to their superiors in hierarchy, but not to anyone else. But not to anyone else. This is what they have done, and then after that, we have continued with the same structures after independence, and that is where it had become problematic. Why? Because successive administrative systems since independence have made sure, successive governments since independence have made sure that there will not be either accountability or responsibility of administrators towards the citizens. By 1990, we have realized that these administrative structures are a complete failure. It only resulted in massive levels of corruption. That's when we spoke about implementing governance reforms. We have spoken about so many reforms: 73rd, 74th Amendment, citizen charters, social audits, grievance redressal mechanisms, e-governance, then public-private partnerships. All of them, all the reforms are to make bureaucracy accountable and responsible. But unfortunately, most of them have not been successful again because of our failure to make changes to the colonial structures. So what do we say here? If, uh, if we have to ensure good governance, there must be accountability and responsibility. And this can be ensured only by implementing multidimensional reforms. That is what we have to write for this question. Then let us move on to the next question. The PMO has become a powerful institution in itself by virtue of its role in decision making on strategic issues of utmost importance. Examine the statement. The statement was given in a positive light. It said that the PMO had become a powerful institution by virtue of its role in decision making on strategic issues of utmost importance. So, what we have to remember here is that PMO by itself had not become powerful institution by default. It had become powerful only whenever the country had a powerful prime minister. Whenever the country had witnessed a prime ministerial form of government, automatically it resulted in what we call strengthening of the office of PMO. Whether it was during the times of Indira Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi or the present Prime Minister, PMO had become extremely powerful. How and why? Why? Because by the time Atal Bihari Vajpayee had become the Prime Minister, the scope of PMO, the size of PMO has expanded. It has more than 350 officials working there in the PMO, including officials of the rank of you know, secretary in the government of India. The rank of the rank of secretary in the government of India, and then there was rapid expansion because we have seen coalition governments. It was the PMO who was supposed to, it was the PM who was supposed to resolve all the conflicts and also ensure coordination. Automatically, the functioning of the role of PMO has expanded. Why? Because earlier these functions were supposed to be performed by the cabinet secretariat. Now it has been gone to the PMO. Then we also have witnessed wherein there's a Department of Nuclear Energy, Department of Space, and Atomic Energy. All these departments had come under PMO, and Prime Minister is also residual legatee. The Prime Minister also, since independence, has taken a lot of interest in the foreign policy of the country. So it is the PMO that is formulating the foreign policy of the country also. This is what we have seen, and that is when. And in recent times, our Prime Minister is also taking a lot of interest in what we call. He's also taking a lot of interest in what is called these uh, economic affairs also. Atmanirbhar Bharat packages, budget formulation, everything is done by nowadays Preamble only on its own. So coming, if we take all these things into consideration, ultimately we can say that we are witnessing a huge what we call increasing importance of PMO. Is it good for or bad for democracy? That's a different thing. As we study, a strong PMO is a salvation for any prime minister, but it can go against what we call the principle of the Council of Collective Responsibility of Council of Ministers. And what is the solution? Let there be a strong PMO, but it remains at the background only. It should remain the back office of the Prime Minister only. That is what you have to write here. Go to the next question then. Well-planned and goal-oriented training programs are the backbone of the civil services system in India. Examiner statement. Every year one question will be there regarding the training. Every year one question will be there regarding training. So what we say is that the basic problem with the training in India is that the training in India lacks focus. That is where the problem we say. It lacks focus. Why? Because most of these training programs are outdated and they are mostly what we call follow the collinear structures and procedures. And the training is too academic in nature. What we say, it is too pedagogic in nature for it to be having any practical significance. And then training is mostly promotion oriented, and then induction training is also not much, there is not much focus on induction training, because the ranks and cadres of the civil servants are decided even before they go to the training institutions. That is the reason why they simply do not give importance to training. Training is always considered as a paid holiday by all our civil servants, and that is the reason why what is required is that we need a training program which is very planned and oriented. That is where you talk about mission Karma Yogi. You have to write about mission Karma Yogi for this question, wherein our Prime Minister has said that the objective of mission Karma Yogi is to from rule oriented to role oriented. The focus is on outcomes. The focus is on objective performance evaluation. The focus is on making bureaucrats efficient, accountable, transparent, integral, and honest, objective, rational, so on and so forth. All these things that you have to write here. You are basically writing about the mission Karma Yogi here. Then let us go to the next question. Budget proposals in the parliament state legislatures fail to ensure their effective scrutiny. The factors which constrain effective scrutiny, analyze the factors which constrain effective scrutiny of budget proposals. Now, the budgetary proposals are not what we call complete, in the sense that whatever we see in the budget, it is not possible for us to ensure that whether the parliament or state legislatures can ensure accountability of the executive by looking at the budgetary proposals. What is the problem here? What is the problem here? Let us try to find out what exactly is the problem here. The basic issue here is that we have only line item budgets. Line item budgets only we have, wherein the money is given without linking them to either outputs or outcomes. So because of this, what happens is that it becomes difficult for the parliament or the state legislatures to fix accountability and also to ensure their effective scrutiny. Second problem is that the discussion that takes place on the floor of the house in the budget sessions, whether it is parliament or state legislatures. Please remember, the number of days the state legislative assemblies meet in an year are very, very less. If you look at this, the number of days the state legislature meets in recently in Punjab or other states is only 90 days in a year. Where is the question of the state legislature discussing parliament budgetary proposals? The state governments, most of the time, they don't present the budget on time also. They don't budget the present on time also. Next thing is that at the central level, the budgetary discussions are never what we call extensive in nature, in-depth in nature. So what happens here is that as part of these budgetary discussions, what we see here is that the demand for grants are discussed for some time, general discussion. Then the speaker would put all those demand for grants to vote without any discussion. What we call it as Educator. So there is a question of scrutiny here. Then the next problem is these departmental committees are also there. We have 24 departmental committees, but again their functioning is far from effective. Recently, Rajya Sabha chairman expressed extreme happiness because some of the departmental committees have met for 2 hours also. If this is the standard, you don't know whether to laugh or cry. That is what he said. He was extremely happy that they met for 2 hours also. The longest period of time they met was 2 hours. Nobody gives them any kind of nobody gives them any kind of significance or importance. This is where the problem is. Next problem is with the budgets is that the services of CAG are not available to all those committees, because most of these budgetary proposals are mostly what we call in technical terms. The members of parliament are professional politicians. They don't have any knowledge about administration, and that is where again the problem comes up, because most of them are in technical in nature. Members of parliament simply do not go in depth into all those things. They just look at the macro aspects. Next problem here is that in India, monies are allocated in budgets on the basis of policies, but not on the basis of programs or projects. Since on the basis of policies, monies are allocated, there is no scope for micro evaluation of budgetary proposals. This is where again another problem is. Once we know the problems, we can always come up with the solutions. First and foremost, we say that what is needed is outcome budgets. Every ministry and department, we need performance budgeting and we need outcome budgeting. Next, the members of parliament should be given training. Third, parliament should remove this skeleton from its procedures. Fourth, at the state level also, the budget should be presented on time with linked to outcomes. And then we have in most of the states also, this budgetary expenditure is never adhered to by the state governments. Recently, in Andhra Pradesh, the CAG has pointed out that there is so much of expenditure spent by the government which was not there in the budget. So at the end of the day, it becomes just a formality, and that is when the problem comes up. So you have to write all these things. You have to write all these things. Then let us move on to the next question. 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts aimed at making the third tier of government powerful and effective for democratic decentralization. Critically examine the extent to which this goal has been transformed into reality. The question is repeated almost every year. Every year the same question is asked about the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. When in 1992 it was decided that in order to make development administration successful, what is required is this third tier in governance. It was felt that this third tier in governance is the missing link in terms of the development administration. But the implementation of this 33rd, 74th Amendment has been far from effective. It has been far from effective. As rightly pointed out by Second IAS in its report, it has said that ultimately these reforms were implemented only in letter but never in spirit. These local self-governments, it has said, were only local in form, otherwise state and central in content. There were so many problems. On the positive side, what we can say is that suddenly India has moved towards what is called participatory democracy from representative democracy. Before the implementation of 73rd, 74th Amendments, we had less than around 6,000 representatives for a country of more than 1 billion people. Now we have more than 3.2 million people elected representatives, out of which more than 1/3 of them are women, which clearly shows that we are moving towards what is called participatory democracy. This is the only positive aspect of 73rd, 74th Amendments. Otherwise, there are so many problems. First and foremost, Gram Sabhas. The meetings of Gram Sabha are never held regularly. When the parliamentary state assemblies don't meet, where is the question of Gram Sabhas meeting? Then we also have the huge size of Gram Sabhas. The population of Gram Sabha is the Gram Sabha. We say the example of what is called direct democracy. But the population has increased so much in the last 30 years that it has become impossible to hold the meetings of Gram Sabhas. It has become almost impossible to hold the meetings of Gram Sabhas. That is where again problem had come up. Then women representation. Even though women are given reservations, the basic problem with India is that we wanted to implement political reforms without implementing social and economic reforms. Still, India is a patriarchal society, patriarchal attitudes, and women are still treated as secondary grade citizens. So you can come out with as many legislations as you want unless you change the social fabric of the society. That is where the problem is, right? Exactly. On the other hand, whatever the financial powers that are given to the 73rd, 74th, the local self governments, they only resulted in what most of this World Bank also has said. It only resulted in what is called democratization of corruption and decentralization of corruption, because these local self governments have been given a lot of powers without any accountability mechanisms. It led to politicization of development process at the local level. What we call it as old localism. And then, as we say, three important things: functions, functionalities, and finances, which all of you know. Then in recent times, functionality also has been added. So if you look at all of them combined together, what you can say is that at the end of the day, these local self-governments have been a failure. After writing all these things, you have to talk about what should be done, what can be done, and what are the solutions. Once we know the problems, as I keep on saying, solutions are very easy. What are the solutions then we talk about? First and foremost, what the government must do is the government must make sure that these functions, functionalities, and finances are given to the local self-governments. Next, all the reforms that we have discussed in our classes regarding the Gram Sabha, you have to write all of them. Then you also have to talk about this moving towards new localism, because this old localism at the end of the day has only resulted in decentralization and democratization of corruption. We have to move towards new localism. That also, yes, you can quote them, Arsenal, you can quote them. All those things also you can quote them, definitely. So this is where the problem is. And then what is required at the end of the day is political will. The number of centrally sponsored schemes are going up every day. At the end of the day, the number of centrally sponsored schemes are only going up every day. And what happens when the number of centrally sponsored schemes go up? These local self-governments, they would only become line agencies responsible for implementation, but not institutions of self-governance, as Mahatma Gandhi envisaged. That is what Mahatma Gandhi has said. Mahatma Gandhi has said that he wanted these local self-governments, villages, to be transformed into self-sufficient independent republics. But we have not seen, because of the attitude of both the central as well as state governments. Next, let us move on to the next question. NHRC is handicapped by its jurisdictional limitations of not being able to investigate the cases of violation of human rights by armed forces. Discuss. Why this question was asked? It was very simple. This question was asked because what happened in Nagaland. In Nagaland, Assam Rifles, a central police organization, it had indulged in killings of innocent people. NHRC cannot do anything. Even judiciary cannot do anything. There were so many atrocities that were committed by armed forces, as part of what they call it as a error of judgment, wherein innocent people were perceived to be terrorists and they were shot dead without giving them an opportunity also. It led to what we call police state. And one of the important reasons why the country is still witnessing so much of militancy terrorism is because of the perceived abuse of human rights by the armed forces. We are not only talking about the fake and we are not only talking about the killings here. We are also talking about the torture in in the prisons, and also about these third degree methods they use also. That is the reason why we say that in India we need what is called strict implementation of rule of law. NHRC, the basic problem here is that NHRC is handicapped because NHRC cannot investigate the cases related to violation of human rights by the armed forces. Who can investigate the cases? Even judiciary also cannot investigate. First, forget about NHRC. Even judiciary also cannot investigate. And most of the time, these armed forces take shelter under what is called national security. So is the case with the police forces also. So is the case with police forces. So then what is the solution? Either you have to give all these examples of Jammu and Kashmir or Northeast, Iram Sharmila. She went on fast for years and years together demanding this repeal of AFSP, Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So that is where you have to start here. This Armed Forces Special Powers Act should be used in a judicious manner. Secondly, if there is any kind of what we call these killings by the army, they must be investigated thoroughly, because what is more important is rule of law. Even national security has to be subordinated to rule of law. Because what is the point of having security when there is no rule of law, when there is no protection of your own people? No one, including army, can be given what we call complete freedom. So let NHRC be allowed to investigate the cases. Let NHRC investigate those cases with the help of army only, so that there is they are giving what we call equal opportunities for army also to come out with their own position. Because when the army itself comes out with their own courts and investigate the cases, they can always be questioned for their impartial investigations. You don't punish your own people. That is what exactly happened in most of the cases also. Most of the time, what army does is that if it is found that any officer has indulged in these kind of killings, they will transfer that officer. Beyond that, nothing else will happen. That is not what the case. It should be done. Rule of law must prevail. And that is what you have to write for this question. So, this is what about this question. Let us move on to the next question. Contemporary urbanism advocates the integration of diverse modes of urban planning and management concerns. Contemporary urbanism advocates the integration of diverse modes of urban planning and management concerns. Discuss the above statement in the light of urban development in India. This is what we say. What we say is that now urban development cannot be seen through independent silos. It cannot be seen through only infrastructure. It cannot be seen only through human resource development. It cannot be seen only through disaster management. It cannot be seen only through transportation. It cannot be seen only through communication. It cannot be seen only through underground drainage system. So what is required at this point of time when we say is that this urban development, what we say is that this urban development, contemporary urbanism, it talks about integration of diverse modes of urban planning and management concerns. What are those concerns that we are talking about? What are those diverse concerns and what kind of integration that we are talking about? So what we are saying here is that what is needed is what is called holistic urban development. What do we mean by that? Holistic urban development. What we are saying is that you need to focus on infrastructure, you need to focus on transportation, you need to focus on communication, you need to focus on livelihoods, you need to focus on social sector, you need to focus on sustainable development, you need to focus on industrialization, you need to focus on you need to focus on developing satellite towns. All of them should be integrated into urban development. The smart cities project normally talks about integrating all of them, but it was not as successful it should have been, as it should have been. It was not as successful as it should have been, the smart cities project. That is the reason why, in India, if you look at the urban development in India, Unfortunately, this urban development in India is completely haphazard. There is what we call complete unplanned and is completely what we call totally indisciplined growth of urban areas in our country. They are growing. They are growing the way they are growing. Just like in an ad hoc and temporary manner without having any plan for the future. That is the reason why almost all urban areas in our country are facing the same kind of problems, whether it is traffic conditions, whether it is crime, increasing crime, whether it is in a complete collapse of urban infrastructure, whether it is urban flooding, whether it is high levels of pollution. You know, you see that in almost urban areas in our country, the same problems can be seen with a sickening regularity. So, what is the solution then? The solution lies in having an integrated, holistic perspective towards urban development, wherein you are integrating growth, welfare, development, equity, most importantly, environment, sustainable development. That is what is required for India. What you must do is that you must plan, not only for the present but also for the next 15 years to 20 years. You must also make sure that the equity concerns are addressed, because what is happening is that in most of the urban areas you can see independent sellers. On the one hand, you have very rich people having all kinds of comforts and luxuries, and on the other hand, you have the poor people living in extremely inhuman conditions, and that is where the problem is. So you have to write all those things. Proceeding further, rural development programs are designed to facilitate multifaceted growth of rural people. Evaluate the role of some uh, key rural development programs in India in this context. The question says that rural development programs are designed. They say that they are designed to facilitate multifaceted growth of rural poor. Evaluates the role of some of the key rural development programs in India in this context. Multifaceted growth of rural people. What do we mean by that? It means that you are talking about multidimensional development of people in rural areas. What does it mean? It means that you are talking about education, health, standard of life, employment, agriculture, then skill development, sustainable development. You are talking about all of them, and that is where you have to discuss about some key rural development programs. So what are the key rural development programs that we are talking about here? For example, for employment, you talk about NREGA. For education, you talk about the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. For health, you talk about Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, PMJAY. Then for agriculture, you talk about all the schemes, PM Kisan and other schemes of the government. And then for industrialization, you talk about MSMEs in rural areas. Then you have agro processing industries, food processing industries. Then overall, you have these programs like food security in rural areas. Then for housing, you have PM Awas Yojana. For drinking water, the flagship scheme of the government to provide piped water to every household in the country. So these are all the programs that are implemented by the government, what is called a multifaceted growth of rural people. You have to talk about all these programs. In fact, I have discussed all these programs also as part of our prelims classes last year. At that point of time itself, I said that they will be asked mostly in our mains examination also. You can go through those discussions on Unacademy YouTube platform. Like all those classes are there. You can go through them. And then after writing all of them, you have to talk about what else needs to be done also. What is the problem with all those programs and what else needs to be done also. For example, most of these programs are mostly looking at the immediate welfare of the people but not long-term development and needs of the people. They are not. They are only anti-poverty schemes, anti what we call poverty, alleviation schemes, but not poverty removal. The difference between the poverty elevation and poverty removal is that in terms of poverty elevation, you are only providing temporary relief to the people from poverty by giving them subsidies, whereas poverty removal means you are empowering them at the local level. That is where the problem with these schemes and programs of the government. All these schemes and programs, they provide only temporary relief to the people, and unfortunately the governments have not focused on they have not focused on providing what is called long-term sustainable development in rural areas, because rural unemployment is one of the highest, it is highest in the country. Education is also very poor. Literacy levels are also very low. Education and health facilities in rural areas are very less. That is what you have to write here. Then you say that ultimately the government should focus more on, for example, PM Kisan. It provides cash relief to the farmers, but it did not help them in the long term in terms of improving infrastructure. So there should be more emphasis on capital expenditure in rural areas. That is what we say here. Next, go to the next question. Police public relations in India need to be improved. Suggest measures to strengthen the relation between the police and public. As usual, we keep on discussing these questions all the time, every day. We keep on discussing these questions all the time, every day in our classes. What is the problem with the police-people relations? What is the problem with police-people relations in India? The basic problem with police-people relations in India is that there is a lack of trust between police and ordinary citizens. Why this lack of trust between police and ordinary citizens? Why this lack of trust? The problem here is that we still continue with colonial structures. We still continue with colonial attitudes of our police forces. Police still believe that they are a force. As suggested by Second Yasi, the first and foremost change that we have to make here is remove the term force. Remove the term force. Replace that with what we call, replace that with service. Police should be service like any other service, civil services. If it is force, what you are doing is that, if it is force, what you are doing is that you are giving them so much of power. What is the general attitude of ordinary people towards the police in the country? The basic, impression of ordinary people towards police in the country is that they believe that police are there only to protect and promote the interests of rich and powerful sections of society. They believe that, on the other hand, what is the attitude of police towards the people? Police always believe that every poor person is a criminal. That is the attitude of the police. This lack of trust between the police and the people has resulted in very poor police public relations. And how to overcome them? What should be done? Very simple. First and foremost, change the structure, starting with remove these colonial laws. Most of the state governments have replaced 1861 Indian Police Act with their own laws, but unfortunately they were exact replicas of the 1861 laws. So you need to make police more efficient and accountable. Implement Supreme Court recommendations. The 7 recommendations Supreme Court had given to make our police forces efficient, accountable, and responsive. Then provide sensitivity training to our police forces. District collectors can play a very important role here. Since the police do not enjoy what we call a good image, district collectors can act as a bridge between the police and ordinary citizens. They can act as a bridge between police and ordinary citizens. That is what you have to say. Sensitivity training. There must be effective grievance redressal mechanisms. All of them are needed to make sure that we have better police-people relations. Community policing has become nothing but an instrument in the hands of the rich and powerful people, like any other reforms. All of them have been misused and abused. Next, let us move on to the next question. Let us go to the next question. In the past 2 decades, India's public policy on disaster management has shifted its focus from rescue to relief and rehabilitation efforts to holistic management of disaster. Analyze. Again, this is the statement that was directly picked up from second ERC reports. This is the statement that was directly picked up from second ERC reports. So, what we are saying here? What we are saying here is that if you see policies related to disaster management in India, till say around 2000, till around 10th 5-year plan, disaster management in India was mostly reactive in nature. As we used to say in those things, disaster management in India is either disaster of management or management of disaster, but not truly disaster management. It was restricted only to, disaster management was restricted only to what we call, immediate response. Even that response was also a disaster. That's what I said. Disaster management in India is either management of disaster, that is response, or disaster of management. Even the response of the government was itself is a big disaster. And we have witnessed the consequence of it also. 2 important disasters have changed our attitude towards disasters. One, this Gujarat earthquake, Gujarat and Maharashtra earthquake, wherein thousands of people died. Second one is the tsunami of 2004, Latur in Maharashtra, Bhuj in Gujarat, when the present Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. And then 2004 tsunami, which led to death of lakhs of people all around the world. That is when, for the first time, we have realized the consequences of this poor disaster management. That is when, in 2005, we had come out with NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority. This act was passed in Parliament. We have set up National Disaster Management Authority at the central level, then SDMA at the state level, and DDMA at the local level. District Disaster Management Authority also at the local level. So, this is what we have done. DDMA also at the local level, at the district level. What we have done, we have recognized the fact that disaster management has 4 important steps. Disaster cycle has 4 important steps. First is what we call prevention or mitigation. Second one is preparedness. Third one is response. Fourth one is relief and rehabilitation. That is what we call holistic management of disaster. In India, till then, disaster management was restricted only to response and nothing else. That means after the disaster takes place, immediately the government responds, and this response itself was also a big disaster. That is what they used to say all the time in India. Every natural disaster in India is always inevitably followed by man-made disaster. For example, floods are always followed by waterborne diseases. And after that, we have realized, as rightly pointed out by United Nations, every $1 single dollar spent on prevention can save $12 in terms of disaster management. That is when we have done. But in spite of all these efforts, definitely what the government has done is that government has spent a lot of money on buying equipment in geographical positional systems, GPS, and also providing early warning systems to the coastal states and everything else, because of which there have been a huge amount of decline in the loss of life as well as property due to these disasters. For example, in 1999, Odisha cyclone led to death of more than 10,000 people. Later in 2000s, a cyclone of much more severe intensity had struck Odisha coast, but the loss of human life was minimal. These are all what we call the successes of our disaster management policy, especially when it comes to floods and cyclones. And we also had come out with some policies related to this cloudburst and everything else. 2013, Uttarakhand cloudburst had taught us important and invaluable lessons about this protection of the hills as well as sustainable development. But in spite of all these things, still disaster management in India is not what it should be. Unfortunately, we have experienced the worst aspects of our disaster management during the corona crisis. First and foremost, the government had announced complete lockdown. The government had announced this complete lockdown without giving opportunity for the people to reach their homes also. There we have seen the worst kind of internal migration, wherein lakhs and lakhs of people were working on their foot, hundreds of kilometers to reach their homes in extremely severe summer. Neither the central government nor the state governments had come to the rescue. It was only the civil society organizations that had provided succor, relief to those people. On the other hand, central government and state governments have treated it as a law and order problem, and they were mercilessly beaten by the police. That is where we need to have better as far as the disaster management is concerned. It is as simple as that. We need to have empathy, which is the most important part of disaster management. Unfortunately, we don't have. Next, during the corona crisis, the second wave, again, it was complete politicization. Unfortunately, all the institutions have failed the people of the country during this. Legislature, parliament was not meeting at all. Executive was busy in elections in Bengal. Judiciary was criminally absent. Media has diverted the attention of the people to insignificant issues. More than 5 million people died. There was no accountability in the system. After the first wave, the government simply had not taken enough measures. The government celebrated the victory over corona without realizing the fact that without understanding the scientific evidence that the second and third waves are much more severe than this first wave in most of the previous outbreak of viruses. Completely unscientific approach of the government to disaster management. Of course, after the second wave, the government had learned lessons, and definitely India's what we call vaccine policy can be called a huge success. But it had come with a very big price also. We had paid a huge amount of price for the negligence on the part of the central and state governments. They were not willing to conduct tests. They were fudging statistics. They were not willing to report the deaths of people, as we have discussed earlier. These dead bodies were floating, and unfortunately, the government was completely absent. Complete absence of government. That is the reason why we say that this disaster management needs a lot of improvement in India, in spite of what are the changes that have taken place in the last 2 decades. We need still a lot more, we need still what is called, we need still a lot more changes in our disaster management policies. That is where, it can be successful. For example, the government must spend a lot of money on improving health infrastructure. Unfortunately, neither the central and nor state governments are willing to do the same thing. In this year's budget, you can see the real expenditure on health sector has come down instead of going up. State governments are also not putting enough efforts there because people have very short memory. So that is the reason why we need more what we call a proactive and holistic approach to disaster management in India. Next, let us move on to the next question. The institutional legacy of well-entrenched state affected the post-reform promises in India. Explain the statement in the light of economic reforms in India. Again, these kind of statements, those who have attended our classes, they know. This is what we say. The most important reason why economic reforms in India are not as successful, we won't call it as a failure, they are not as successful as they should have been because of the unwillingness of the state to relinquish its reins, its power. We have not implemented governance reforms. Still, we have the colonial structures wherein there is absolute monopoly of the state over allocation of resources. That invited the charges of crony capitalism. In India, at best, public-private partnerships can at best be described as the instruments of crony capitalism. In the name of public-private partnerships, what we have done is we have transferred the precious resources of the country to the private sector at throwaway prices. Why? Because there is so much of secrecy. There is absolute monopoly of the state, complete absence of accountability mechanisms, and a huge amount of discretionary powers. All of them combined together made sure that this well-entrenched state has made sure that the reforms mostly would remain only on paper. Even now also, if you look at all the Atmanirbhar Bharat and all these packages that the government had come out with, what all of them have done is that all of them will be implemented under the watchful eyes of the state. The state is not willing to relinquish its power. And for example, the best example is take the case of these regulatory authorities. All these regulatory authorities, they are totally ineffective. Whether it's SEBI or TROI or PFRAI or any other regulatory authority, you name it, all of them have been a failure for the simple reason that the state is not willing to give them real powers. The state is not willing to make them effective, and that is where the problem is. On the other hand, as our Prime Minister has also pointed out, what we are witnessing in India is still continuation of Inspector Raj, wherein the bureaucracy still retains maximum control over the economic activities of the people. It still retains maximum control over the activities of the people, and the private sector still cannot function independently. The private sector cannot function independently. Even the private sector are always under the shadow of the fear of the government. On the other hand, if any of the private sector wants to be independent, unfortunately the government is using these other corruption agencies and other ones to create terror. And then this misconceived Atmanirbhar Bharat package, it only causing more harm. Why? Because they are not allowing the foreign sectors to come and invest in our country in a free and frank manner. After this, the Corona crisis had erupted in 2020, it was thought that India could become the what is called the back office of the factory of the world because of the supply side restrictions that were imposed in China. Unfortunately, India could not benefit. All these industries went to Southeast Asia countries. Thailand had become the, whereas India has missed a golden opportunity. Why? Because India has failed to sign RCEP. Why? Because India still is considered a difficult country to do business with because of the excessive power in the hands of the state. That is where the problem is. So what is needed is, as we study all the time, minimum government and maximum governance. On the other hand, even after 30 years of economic reforms, we have maximum government and very less governance. That is where the problem in India. We need to change the attitudes of our bureaucracy. We must implement governance reforms. We must ensure competition in service delivery mechanisms. We must give more independence to regulatory authorities. In the age of globalization, governance means regulation. So our regulatory authorities simply don't have the skills or knowledge or experience or expertise to regulate. They believe in more physical controls than in regulation. That is where the problem is. We need more experts in the government working in different sectors, different departments and ministries. That is where the solution lies. Let's move on to the last question. Do you agree with the view that the civil services in India is losing its neutral and anonymous character? Argue your case. Almost every year, these kind of questions are repeatedly asked. Do you agree that the civil services in India have are losing their neutral and anonymous character? What is neutrality and what is this anonymity? That is what we have to discuss here. What is this neutrality? When we talk about this neutrality, what we say is that we talk about two types of neutrality. One is political neutrality. Second one is value neutrality. Value neutrality means it is said that they are only the instruments. They are only the instruments, and they should implement the policies that are formulated by the political executive. That is what we say about value neutrality. And whereas political neutrality means that they are part of what is called in a permanent institution called civil services, and they are expected to completely be politically neutral because they are part of permanent executive. They have to serve the country for 35 years, and whereas the political executive is temporary in nature. Political executive is only temporary in nature. They should not have any political ideologies of their own. But we have seen this kind of balanced polity. We have seen this kind of balanced polity only up to say maybe mid 1960s, wherein the political executive and bureaucracy functioned within their domains, and they did not interfere into the domain of others. But after that, especially from 1970s onwards, we have seen the politicization of our civil services. Our civil servants have lost this neutrality. The then Prime Minister during emergency had given a call for a committed bureaucracy. She said that bureaucracy should be committed to the ideology of the ruling political party in power. She felt that since the bureaucracy was not committed to her ideology of socialism and secularism, they were not implementing the development programs and schemes. That is when she demanded total commitment, and that is where we need that is when we have seen what is called politicization of civil services in our country. That is when we have seen the politicization of civil services at the top level. It resulted in complete politicization of civil services. And then we also have by 1990s, this politicization of civil services had reached the state level also. By 1990s, it had reached the state level also. Right? It had reached the state level also by 1990s. Because of the emergence of various regional political parties, and because of also this many multi-party system also at the state level. So we have seen the politicization of civil services at the state level also by 1990s. And in the last few years also, we have seen this politicization of civil services. Why? Because political executive, both at the central and state level, what they are doing, political executive both at the central and state level, they are using various instruments to ensure the commitment of bureaucracy, transfers, promotions, postings. In recent times, what we are witnessing is post-retirement positions also. If you are committed to the political executive, you will be given post-retirement positions. If you look at it in PMO, most of the officers have retired from services long time back. We had the principal secretary in the PMO. He retired from services long time back, almost 15 years back. Still, he continued in the government. What the political executive wants is that they wanted a bureaucracy which is completely committed, and in the process, they were losing their neutrality. Anonymity. With the spread of social media, what we are witnessing is that these young civil servants, these IAS officers and IPS officers, they are using the social media, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything else, and they are looking for more publicity for themselves. They are looking at more publicity for themselves. They are looking at more publicity for themselves, and they are losing the anonymous character also. This is what it was expected. Civil servants were expected to work from behind the closed doors. On the other hand, what we are witnessing is that these civil servants are looking for more publicity for themselves, and definitely they are losing their anonymous character also. So, but after writing all these things, you have to talk about the solutions also. What should be done? The first one is you have to prevent the politicization of civil services. You must prevent politicization of civil services. How? By implementing civil services reforms. All the reforms that Second Administrative Reforms Commission had spoken about. You need to have Central Civil Services Board. You must have ex-post ex-ante accountability in terms of ex-post accountability. You must depoliticize their promotions, transfers, and everything. And then, as far as anonymity concerned, no problem, because as long as they are doing good work, because self-esteem is also one of the important needs of civil servants. They are also human beings. They also need some kind of name and fame for themselves. But at the same time, it should be made sure that they are not spending most of their time only on social media and forgetting their primary work of primary function of working for the people. That is what we say here, right? So this is about the entire question paper. As you can see it here, those who have attended our classes and the test series, almost everything was discussed in our classes as well as in the test series. Otherwise, the question paper is very easy. So I hope this discussion, 2 hours discussion, would have helped you to clarify your doubts and also write answers to these questions. And we have also come to the end of our class. We have reached the end of our time also. So we can stop it here for today, and we will meet again with other topics in the future. Till then, take care of yourself. Best of luck.